So moving into federal efforts to address the Medicaid inmate exclusion policy. So on the screen, you will see just a chart of bills that we're currently tracking. I also put a QR code to our toolkit, which I'll go over as a resource at the end of my presentation. But our toolkit really contains the information that you need to get started with your federal advocacy efforts on this issue. So talking points, sample letters to the editor, which would be like op-eds and things if you want to like plant a story somewhere. We give you some text for that, as well as some sample tweets. So please use the tools that are in that resources to help you with your advocacy at the federal level. So in terms of federal efforts, we recognize that some of the local efforts that I covered, suspension versus termination, taking advantage of the 1115 waivers, are all great. But like I said, they're not the end all be all to addressing this policy comprehensively. Since this is a federal policy language issue, we need federal policy to change the language and to amend this policy so that it does not have the cascading negative effects that it has had on local communities. So some bills that we are currently tracking on this efforts is the Due Process Continuity of Care Act. It's been introduced in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and it is led primarily in the Senate by Senator Cassidy. So basically what this bill would do is it would provide access to Medicaid for pretrial individuals, as well as planning grant dollars for states to implement this policy. So great to see that this policy was introduced in the Senate. We've been tracking it closely since its introduction. There are some legislative vehicles and opportunities for passage. And the other good thing about this bill is that it is bipartisan. So it has both Democratic and Republican support. The second bill I'll mention is the Reentry Act. And this also has a Senate and House bill, and it is led primarily in the House by Representative Trone from Maryland. And this bill would provide access to Medicaid 30 days prior to release from local jail, which is another side of the coin in terms of addressing the inmate exclusion policy, as I mentioned. This bill is also bipartisan. I will say that reentry does not have as much support, unfortunately, bipartisan support as due process continuity of care. With due process continuity of care, we really can make the case that this is a constitutional violation of rights, that an individual who hasn't been convicted of a crime is essentially penalized through the removal of their health benefits. But with Reentry Act, we're talking about purely justice-involved individuals who've been convicted of a crime and are coming back into their community. Unfortunately, that's sad to say that there's less empathy for an individual who has served time than an individual who hasn't been convicted of a crime, but that's the state of where we are. We're working to overcome that through education and continued outreach. But for now, they are at least both bipartisan.